Licensing office. How many people in this country just go to get their license, do the test as normal, the proper way, how it's supposed to be done, and walk out? All of these little things, we just turn a blind eye to them. How many bureaucracies need to be smoothed over and the wheels greased? But they're not hurting anybody, right? Until all of a sudden, those squeaky wheels could be greased to move things that can't hurt people. When turning a blind eye now causes a police service to be compromised. It don't need to be all of them. It just needs to be some of them. And the perception is there. So we ignore little laws and we see big problems. Now we want to ignore big laws and we expect not to get further problems. We don't have confidence in the police to solve the issue, but we want them to take the gloves off. How does that even make sense? There are good police officers there who I would trust. I don't want them to take the gloves off. I don't want them to go too far. And I understand what the caller from Tobago was trying to say, that there are legal ways, but those ways definitely have limits. And a lot of them, there's a lot of legal dubiousness and uncertainty and gray area in a lot of those instances. But for the most part, with local law enforcement, I have never heard of a case where they have any sort of wiggle room to enact any sort of hard justice. I don't. This is one of the lines where I don't think society could cross. Anyway, I'm over time. There was more topics to say, but we don't have time to get into there. Let's take a break. When we come back, we have my colleague, Janelle John Bates, should be joining me. There's another issue that worries me. I think that a lot of these issues are connected now. But I'll take a break here. When we return, we'll get into more controversial topics on Talking Points. Stay tuned.
Alan's Funeral Home, Tunapuna. Relax. We know the loss of a loved one can be challenging, but we've got your back for all your funeral needs, from documents to the service and or burial. Let Alan's Funeral Home take care of you and your loved ones. We are located on the Eastern Main Road in Tunapuna. Call us today at 663-1829 or visit allansfuneralhome.com. Alan's Funeral Home. Let us take care of business.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Let the Home Store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shag brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. I am joined by my colleague, youth influencer, attorney at law, a hard-working woman who has taken time out of her day to come and speak to social issues in TNT specifically. Good morning, Mrs. John Bates. It is good to see you once again.
Good morning. It is good to see you in person.
I miss you. It's been too long.
Yes, it feels like a very long time every time now.
But you know, I'm grateful for when you're here. So let's go straight to the topics that we want to speak about, and I have tried to use open-ended titles because I don't want the titles to necessarily kind of push the narrative or the perception of what we're saying in any direction. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of instances that I wanted to speak about. Well, one I mentioned, and then you also brought up the second instance. There seems to be a conversation with regards to discrimination and crime, right? Whether it is the cause of crime, the motivations behind certain crimes, right? Mm-hmm. And what I'm speaking about in particular is, well, one union leader has interestingly, and I say this interestingly because I'm not sure if what he said, mm-hmm. the obvious motivation is actually his intention. And I just want to make sure, Ansel Roger of JTOM, he did say that
young black males are the chief perpetrators of crime. Well, that's the headline that they use.
Right. So, but then when you read into the article, I'm not sure if, because I mean, it'll be kind of weird for him to basically say, yes, blame the young black men. You know, I don't think that's what he's actually saying, but usually when that statement is made, that's kind of like that's the charged energy that comes along with it, right?
Yes.
And then, of course, one secondary or not, there's also the religious desecration or vandalism, which some leaders religious and political, and in this case, both political leaders of the two main parties of parliament, or the two parties of parliament, apparently agree on something, that it's not religious discrimination.
Well, I guess we can leave the religious one aside for the moment, because that's separate from what the main topic, which is the race one. What I think you forgot to mention coming out of that sort of racial spin on crime is the comments from Senator Thompson-IE.
Yes.
Now, she has indicated that she doesn't think, I believe I'm quoting her saying here in the Express, that there's a popular view that crime is committed by poor black boys. And that has been perpetuated by successive governments. But then she called on us to think about white-collar crime and why basically is white-collar crime not viewed in the same way. She said that too many times people see crime as a product of poor black disadvantaged miscreant boys, with the police being quick to arrest them. She said a boy wearing a Russell Latipi High School uniform was more likely to face arrest than another from St. Mary's College and Queen's Royal College. So I think there she actually merged two issues. Because there are black boys in all three of those schools. So I think there's a merger of the race and socioeconomic, if you wish, background in that assertion. Because
I actually, when hearing her comments initially, the race one I found less pertinent or valuable. The socioeconomic one I did find, based on what I've seen in the past and my thoughts about it, throughout, not just my initial reaction. But then, like you pointed out, it's not as though QRC is an all rich white school, right? I mean,
QRC seems to me now looking on actually predominantly boys of African descent now. Back in the day, or even maybe when we were in secondary school, it was more mixed back then. But now it seems to be largely boys.
When I was in secondary school, although, to be honest, I would say I went to Fatima.
When we were in secondary school, at the same time.
I was a little bit before you, just a little bit. But no, like even in Fatima, yes, there were people of higher socioeconomic bracket of various races, and there was some, for lack of a better way to put it, lighter skinned individuals, because it's various.
Fall in such a category.
Exactly. But I actually think the predominant racial makeup of my classmates were either Afro-Trinidadian or Indo-Trinidadian. Right? So to say, well, this school and the socioeconomic, because I'm sure, like, when I went to Fatima and I pointed this out at the moment, there are poor students in prestige schools. They got there because they earned it.
They are poor students. But I don't know if I guess maybe her example doesn't necessarily go to her point.
Yes, her example was bad.
But I think she was more on the socioeconomic point, because she also brought up the fact that boys who live in a particular area would not be placed in the mud and on the ground compared to boys or men of another area. So I feel, despite her using race, or maybe it was a merger of 2 points. But when I first saw that comment from Jatam or Ansel Roger, black boys are chief perpetrators, it did engender in me a sort of visceral reaction, a sort of almost a defensive reaction at first, like, wait, hold up, where are you getting that from? But then when I moved past that and I did reflect on my time as a prosecutor, I was based in the DPP's North office, so I'm working in courts, magistrates courts, primarily in Port of Spain, Arima, Tunapuna, Sandy Grande, and Shogunas. So all those courts, East-West Corridor and Shogunas. And most of the individuals that I did prosecute were of African descent. Then I reflected on what am I seeing in the newspaper when I'm reading, when they post pictures and they place names. Names may not necessarily tell the whole picture. But I mean, we could kind of stereotype from a name, it sounds like a person of African descent. And when you see pictures,
when you see pictures, yes. But I mean, even then, they could be mixed.
They could be mixed. And then when I see videos circulating on social media, when people do capture individuals committing crimes, it does seem to be of people of African descent. So anecdotal, from my own life experience, I'm like, okay, maybe what he's saying is not wrong. And then I said, okay, but what does the statistics say? And the statistics does bear out what he did say. And the statistics, I took this from a newspaper article that pointed out from 2015 to 2019. And most of these articles focus on serious crimes, i.e. murder and what I would call blood crimes, right? So 2015 to 2019, 510 people were charged with murder. 342 of those were of African descent, which is 67%, whereas 107 were of Indo descent, which is 20.9%. And I even went back as far as the Ryan report of 2013. That was the Ryan report called No Time to Quit, Engaging Youth at Risk. It was a report really studying youth and criminality.
Yeah.
And from that data, it says that 83% of gangs in Trinidad were of African descent. I don't know how you describe a gang as African, but I get their point. And 13% were Indian, and all convicted inmates in the 6 prisons in Trinidad in 2007. So these statistics are old, but 61% were of African descent and 26% were of East Indian descent. So the statistics seem to bear out what he's saying. Of course, there's the caveat that you have to understand that these are statistics of people who are caught.
Exactly.
So the people who are prosecuted were people who are charged, the people who are in jail, and the people who are caught. So it
is somewhat reasonable to think that the ratios won't change too much with the actual total crime figure, which we will never truly know.
Right.
We don't expect it to all of a sudden veer in a left turn and we're like, no. 51% of our crime is done by Chinese Trinidadians. Like that, something like that's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Of course, we also have to reflect on the fact, as you brought up the word Chinese Trinidadian, the percentage of the population. We have to accept that.
Yes, that is just basic.
The numbers seem to be varying, but 38 to 40% of the population is of African descent. Similar, although I think higher now, statistics maybe 40% is of...
I think both are over 40, and they grew.
No, I think they're dropping. I think African descent is actually dropping. But who knows? Because CSO statistics are not necessarily all up to date. But let's go with 40, right?
Yeah,
that's for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
There's an equal distribution of people of African descent and Eastern descent in Trinidad.
I actually think both are dropping based on migration, but that's a separate issue.
And mixing, but there you go, right? So statistically, he is correct, and what he has said is not something new. Again, looking at the Ryan report, this is a 2013 report, it identified these facts. In the report, there was an article referring to the state of emergency. And within that article, it would have discussed that at the time of the state of emergency, where Kamala Persad-Bicester, she was the prime minister, she would have pointed out that in 2003, Dr. Keith Rowley at that point actually did indicate that there needed to be a focus on young black males and their involvement in crime. And strangely enough, at that time, she was criticizing him for not strongly, and him and the PNM government of the time, for not strongly pushing initiatives to address young black men, because at the time, the opposition, which she would have been part of, opposed it because they saw it as some sort of, what do you call that in universities when they focus only on black people? Positive, affirmative action. Right, so she saw the focus on black youths at that time. They were the government at the time, which was PNM, were criticized for focusing too much on...
I kind of understand what she's trying to say, but that is a horrible... I don't necessarily agree with affirmative action, but this is not affirmative action.
Right. So, but I only mentioned that to say that this whole issue of one particular grouping, and in this case specifically young black men, being very much highly involved in crime, and I think again crime being mainly what we call serious crime, murders.
Violent crime.
Violent crime is not new.
Yeah.
It's something we have been saying for a long time. People have been saying it in various ways, sometimes criticized. And I think really the point is, what is the end goal of them saying it? And I think that's what really makes some people angry versus not. And you mentioned that when you said, when you really read what Ansel Roger was getting at, it wasn't just a finger pointing.
Exactly. Because here's the thing, and I do want to an extent we import some of our ideology and emotional views on social issues, right? Because in the States, it's a different conversation, right? It's a different conversation because you have the racial demographic is not the same, right? Of course, there are other circumstances that are not the same. So I would quicker understand when someone says, well, look, we have this minority race that is a majority in the criminal justice system and the prison system. And I get that. I would get that you would want to look at it.
How is that possible?
Right? How is that possible?
And there you might see there might be some sort of profiling and discrimination.
Now, at the same time, though, I look at our situation and it's like, look, we don't have a white police force and a white city council, mayor, white government, all white.
Perpetuating white policies.
Right? So it's like, and the thing is, I have seen where we have to now look past the racial discrimination thing. Because even in the States, where you have a city with black police commissioner, black district attorney, black mayor, black city council, you still have people saying systemic racism. It's like, hold on, the system does not have,
Well, I mean, I could still see systemic racism in that particular situation.
But the point I'm trying to make is, it's not that it's what their race is, the race might be secondary. The race might be connected to some extent to other demographic factors, which Anshel Roger was pointing out, which I think in TNT,
that is our...
we don't have we don't even have the obvious thing to say, well, you know, the police forces of one race and the criminals of another. Because I believe the perception is the police force is mostly Afro-Trinidadians, right? Although the irony is 2 out of 3 of the media masters that come on the show are Indo-Trinidadians, right? But
again, the demographics are changing.
Right? Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, it's not as though it's a 95% Indo-Trinidadian police force arresting a 60-something% Afro-Trinidadian to populate the prison systems. That's what the racial split, right? Yeah. So what are the other factors?
And I think for us it's a socio-economic issue. And there could be some socio-economic profiling, because again, when I was going back and looking at the statistics and reading that old school article on the state of emergency, it was pointed out there at the time that when the state of emergency was initiated, they actually, let me read it here. So I'm reading from an excerpt from some other article. The declaration of the state of emergency raised concerns about racial profiling, well, it is a racial profiling, of young black males from economically depressed residential areas, particularly in East Port-of-Spain, a section of the country's capital. Within the first 15 days of the state of emergency, approximately 1,500 young black males were arrested and detained for a wide range of alleged offenses. Within 3 months, over 4,000 black males had been arrested. So it did jog my memory. At that time, there was a massive, it seemed to be a massive rounding up of young black men. But my thing is, it didn't seem to be young black men all over the country. They did seem to congregate on hotspots and were arresting en masse these young black men. So it's a mixture of race, but to me it's about a socioeconomic targeting.
Because the hotspots are where the gangs strongholds are
and
usually
these are
assumed to be,
normally areas that are economically depressed.
Here's the flip side to that. Here's the irony, because to some extent, stereotyping I do believe is true, for better and for worse. But stereotyping is not just racism, and I say that because I know somebody who, as a black man in Trinidad and Tobago, he feels stereotyped by not people of other races, but also by people of his own race. When he will see the side-eye glances of a security guard who is of his race, of police officers who is his race.
I feel that too, sometimes going in stores and people are following me and I'm like, why? I do get annoyed. People following me in stores.
You and him look very different. He looks like somebody who can commit violence. You are a lawyer with glasses.
Well, I don't dress like a lawyer. But that's the thing. I don't. Especially if I dress down, I'm just wearing jeans and jersey, and the people are following me in stores, and I'm like, but why would I literally just walked in the store. What would prompt you to think that I would want to steal anything from here?
Maybe it's the reverse. Maybe you look too nice, and it's like, why are you here? You're not from around. You're outsider. We don't trust you. But all jokes aside, that is the interesting thing about when police do racial profiling and stereotyping. And now the question we have to ask is, to what extent is it? I'll say this: it makes sense and it's also bad. Right?
Yeah, again, you see, it's what we read, as I said, what we read in the newspaper. Every day in the newspaper, you're seeing, when you do catch somebody, you look at the picture. What does it look like? When you...
Well, that's a good point as well. And that's an interesting point that implies a lot that I think needs to be explored, but I don't want to give an opinion because it could go in so many different directions. Who they catch?
Who they catch?
Who they catch?
And even as the senator indicated, she said that police in Trinidad seem to have, well, I'm paraphrasing what she said, but essentially that they are less interested, I think she did say that, in pursuing certain crimes. They only seem to be interested in, I guess, pursuing other crimes. Yeah. So if we look at it, and I don't think it's racial, I do think it's socioeconomic. Yes. Crimes of a certain type will be committed by a particular people of a particular socioeconomic background.
Regardless of race.
Regardless of race, and crimes of another type, let's say white-collar crimes, would be committed by those of a particular socioeconomic background.
Would you say it's fair to say that there's also the fact that, look, when you have concerns about corruption in various systems of our government and law enforcement and private business, right? There will be things for white-collar crime to kind of help shield it. In fact, part of corruption is the protection of white-collar crime,
Well,
right?
yes.
Right? That's just part of the nature of the crime in and of itself.
Yes.
That violent crime and street-level crime, drugs, robberies, home invasions, they're not going to have those same levers to pull. So again, it's about money and power, not about necessarily race, because we have powerful people of all races in this country.
We do, to an extent. But I think sometimes the conversation ends with, so crime, murders or whatever committed by young African men.
Yeah,
and then you end there, and I think that's what sometimes offends people. So
because
or as far as it goes, it's okay. So they commit the crime, lock them up, throw away the key.
Yeah,
or
what
police
does that
should,
mean?
Police should just shoot and eradicate all of them, cockroaches, whatever. And I think that is the problem for me. I think we have to ask why. But asking why is there's so many reasons proffered for why.
Is it because it's just easier to go with the obvious or the simple explanation? Because when you think about marketing, political campaigning, they tend to want to have the one-liner. It could go viral. Even before the internet and what could go viral existed, the one-liner, the simplified message, too long didn't read, at the end. Even before that concept, in politics, in marketing, in communication, you wanted to dumb it down for everybody. You wanted to make it to appeal to the most amount of people. And in doing so, you take a complex issue and you say, well, this one aspect of it, this one aspect that is merely an observation, and we don't even know how it actually causes, if at all. It's just a correlation, sorry. Let's just run with this.
So are you saying that from a media perspective?
I'm saying that
we make it.
Okay, sorry.
No, I was asking, so are you saying from the media perspective as you see that one-liner? Because that was like the headliner for the JTM article. As you said, you had to go deeper to get to where he was going. So are you talking from a media perspective or just generally? We just like to
generally
down.
Society, I think, because that's how the communication happens. And it's harder to get people on board a more complicated message because then not only does it not appeal directly or as easily to the most amount of people, you might have disagreements, but then also people might just zone out. Even before this internet phenomenon of people want immediate gratification, short attention span.
Could be that, but I think a part of the problem in Trinidad is that crime is so rampant, so overbearing at this point. People want solutions now. We can't really get into the roots of crime. Is not something that can be fixed in 6 months, 12 months, whatever. So people want something now.
So then we look at the budget. And the budget forced me to kind of accept the fact that, look, there's short-term and long-term to this, right? And as much as, long-term usually tends to be the hard way but the correct way, we can't necessarily abandon the short-term, right? So we do need some degree of crime fighting to stem the immediate bleeding, but...
Yeah, but not they shoot them on spot. People are now applauding police when they hear police, these stories that you hear in the media, police allegedly happen upon people or a report was made and they follow the person and the person come out of the car and start to shoot and the police shoot and the person is dead. We are applauding that now. When we hear that the individual who was arrested for shooting at the deputy commissioner of police was found, well, he's dead, people are now applauding that because people just feel like when we put them in the system, one, we have to feed them, we have to house them, we have to do this and that. So we're spending money on them. It's taking too long to get to a trial. And oftentimes they get bail and they go back out and commit crime. So people are just fed up of the way the system is running. So they don't mind, kill them.
I mean, yes, with regards to crime less than murder, so, robberies and stuff, I am under the impression, based on talks, that just the sheer amount of cases that the court sees, it can't be all first-time offenders. So there is a lot of repeat offenders out there.
There are a lot of repeat offenders. Very rarely I would have come across a person, whether as a prosecutor or a defense counsel, who did not have
well,
it doesn't have to be long. A criminal record.
Okay.
Rarely, I mean, because by that time, most times I would be interacting with them as adults, because they would have had criminal records from even stemming from when they were minors. So by the time I interacted with most of them, I can't think of anybody who I came across who did not have a criminal record.
So I think every time this comes up, this sort of conversation, what really it says is we don't want to take a hard look at ourselves and answer some of the hard questions, and we kind of just want an excuse. Now, Answer Roger was not pointing to an excuse. He was pointing to potentially what could be the start of the conversation, right?
Yes, he did give what his description of why they end up in crime. He would have said that, what did he say? I had what he said about crime, which seems to have disappeared.
Let me see if I could pull it up for you.
Oh, he said it here. They are the lowest rung of the economic ladder.
Right.
In a cesspool of hopelessness where they feel that the only way out is crime and criminal activity.
Do you think it's fair to say, because you pointed down to 2003 when this topic came up,
well,
my concern is what we're seeing is not anything new. It's just the proportion is new.
Yeah, it's a entrenching of a problem that
started
out while, so it's growing, so it's getting deeper. And I think the longer we leave it, is more it will persist. Because, okay, so as I said, I wanted to move beyond young black boys commit crimes. I wanted to know why. So I got some, well, you see Mr. Roger gave his perspective. It's about being on the lowest end of the economic...
And having no hope. I sum it down to that. I agree with him on that.
And the Ryan report had something similar. In the Ryan report, they would have indicated that one of the perspective from the report, I can't tell you what page I copied and pasted it from. It says that a review of the literature suggests that youth who experience a sense of hopelessness, who believe that they are oppressed, unfairly treated, and neither belong to or have a stake in broader society, are most likely to be at immediate risk of involvement in serious crime. So again, that hopelessness comes up again. And when you had mentioned this topic, interestingly enough, one of the first things that came to my mind was singing Sandra's songs, Voices from the Ghetto. Because recently I attended a Icons and Calypso competition where individuals were singing songs from deceased icons.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's one of the first times I really sat down and listened to the words of Voices from the Ghetto. And that song really translates the hopelessness of people and the cycle of people who live in those areas. So I do believe that sense of hopelessness is one of the key drivers of why people in those areas are more susceptible to a life of crime.
This is an example of kind of like where my concerns are, because even look at the art form of the country and what it used to be and how it is now, right? It's more commercial now, calypso, and that a lot of those traditions are becoming more and more marginalized, I guess you could say, forgotten to some extent. But I think that's just one example or one aspect of how this problem kind of continue to grow. And my concern is, what are the main solutions, right? The improvement of their socioeconomic situation and their prospects and their opportunities. These are all things that have to be solved mostly with long-term things. The dilemma is, how does that help the situation now? Because you have these young men who are committing violence, right? Fixing primary school education ain't gonna help them. Fixing secondary school education ain't gonna help them, right?
So yeah, it's a multi-pronged approach. We have to deal with those who are already there and too far gone. There are people who believe in rehabilitation, but you have to actually get them in a program to rehabilitate them. And then there are those who are growing up and observing the cycle.
Do we care about rehabilitation? Because, and this is not a unique phenomenon to TNT, but you have somebody convicted of a crime, it's on their record. Not a lot of employers necessarily want to deal with that, right?
That is the case, actually. So I went to maximum security last week recently, and I was speaking to someone there, and he pointed out to me he has been in there for like 13 years. And he's on remand, so he hasn't been convicted. And he's like, there's nothing for him really to do there in all those 13 years. And now that there's bail for murder and there's a possibility of getting bail, the thing is, after 13 years sitting down there without much to do, how is he now to get a job? And then
he has no work experience for those 13 years.
No, because he's been there since he was like 19 or 20.
Right, and then now his education is also potentially compromised.
Yes, I mean, he did say there was an opportunity to get some passes while he was in there, but he said while he was there, he's still in there. I think he was basically alluding to that there was a break in the program, the teacher didn't come or something. It wasn't very effective, so eventually he lost interest in it.
Should we be surprised with a bureaucracy that has holes in so many things that rehabilitation programs are, why do we expect them to be run smoothly?
But the thing is, it seems that there are a lot of rehabilitation programs after you've been convicted.
Right.
But then for all these people, a lot of whom are found not guilty, but have been spent all those years in jails.
That's a good point. Right.
Why is there no?
I get it.
Wonder
right.
why
yes.
was there, why it doesn't seem that there's a very active rehabilitation program for those who are waiting.
I think the point is, if the system was working, the need for that would be significantly reduced, right?
Yeah, because their child would have.
The consequences of the system having issues is that it breeds more issues.
Yeah.
So you've just, I didn't fully understand where exactly you were going. Right. I thought he was actually like a criminal, not he was waiting for trial. And,
he has been waiting.
Right,
for,
and he's just there.
He's
no
just there. He's
and
just there.
he will
so there's
have
nothing to do.
Not just that. Well, there's the practical aspect, but then there's also the fact that what are you going to put on your resume? I was in remand for 13 years. Even if trials have this unfortunate phenomenon where they don't always prove you to be innocent. You're just not proven guilty.
You're found not guilty.
You're found not guilty. You're not necessarily proven to be innocent. And that might leave some innocent people in this no man's land.
But I don't even know if in this country anybody is going to say, let me see your written report to see if you were proven.
The way on the streets will come down.
Well,
the rumors will come down. And for certain businesses, whether legally or not, they might make inquiries. Hey, what about so-and-so?
Okay, so I think we have to go to news. But when we come back, I did ask someone for their personal experience of why they felt that they did not fall into a life of crime, having grown up in a hotspot. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. Folks, we'll continue this when we come back. News on the hours next. And when we return, I actually have a similar story to that, which I think I might have given on air. So we'll compare notes. We'll be right back.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I'm Sarah Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Appeal challenges ruling on Trinidad's buggery and indecency laws impacting LGBTQIA+ rights. Early morning shooting in Rio Claro left a police officer injured. 43-year-old man recovering from chop wounds after physical altercation with relative. And regionally, Guyana's Lancet fish 2 well yields significant offshore discovery in Starbrook Block. Now for the details. The legality of buggery and serious indecency laws in Trinidad and Tobago is once again under scrutiny as the Court of Appeal is being asked to review a High Court ruling that declared certain aspects of local sexual offences legislation as unconstitutional due to their criminalization of consensual sexual relations between adults of the same sex. On Wednesday, Justices of Appeal listened to arguments presented by a legal team representing the state, the Evangelical Council of Churches, and Trinidad LGBTQIA+ advocate Jason Jones. Jason Jones had initially initiated the constitutional claim in 2017. The state has filed an appeal against a decision issued on April 12, 2018 by Justice Devendra Rampasad. Additionally, the Council of Churches has intervened as an interested party in this case. Jones also said he intends to pursue marriage equality rights for the LGBTQIA+ community. The incident unfolded as PC Ramkisoon was en route to work along the Naparima-Mayara Road on Thursday morning. While navigating through slow-moving traffic, a sudden and alarming occurrence took place. A gunman reportedly opened fire on a vehicle that was ahead of Ramkisoon, resulting in one of the bullets striking the officer. PC Ramkisoon, who was stationed at the St. Madeleine police station, sustained a single gunshot wound to his shoulder and is currently under medical care at the San Fernando General Hospital. Authorities have determined that Ramkisoon was not the intended target of the shooting. He was an unfortunate victim struck by a stray bullet. Another individual, who remains unidentified at this time, was also injured in the same incident and is reportedly in critical condition while receiving treatment at hospital. A 43-year-old man is recovering from chop wounds after a physical altercation with a male relative in a recent incident. The altercation occurred at approximately 6 p.m. on Wednesday evening at a residence along Stadium Link Road in Marabella. The 43-year-old victim and a 59-year-old male relative was socializing at the residence when a heated argument erupted between them. The argument escalated into a physical confrontation, during which the older man armed himself with a cutlass and inflicted multiple chops on the 43-year-old. Bystanders at the residence swiftly intervened, separating the two individuals and preventing further harm. Both victims and the 59-year-old suspect were subsequently transported to the San Fernando General Hospital to receive medical attention for their injuries. Regionally, Guyana's Ministry of Natural Resources announced on Thursday a significant breakthrough with the Lancet Fish 2 appraisal well in the Stabroek Block. This represents the fourth offshore discovery in Guyana for the year 2023, adding the tally of 46 discoveries made from 2015 to the present. The earlier discoveries this year including Fang-Tooth SE1 and Lancet Fish 1 in the Stabroek Block, as well as the We-1 discovery in Quarantine Block. The Lancet Fish 2 discovery in Liza Petroleum Production License Area has revealed an estimated 20 meters of hydrocarbon-bearing reservoir, along with approximately 81 meters of additional hydrocarbon-bearing sandstone. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for watching.
Since they were on sale, Laura bought these umbrella shoes without thinking. Literally, without thinking. Hungry for deals? You'd better come and satisfy it at KFC before doing something crazy. Wow Bucket, 7 pieces of chicken and 4 regular sides for $115. A finger-licking good deal.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And Janelle said that she had an example to give, and we were comparing notes off air to our discussion, sort of like some of these successes that we could then discern factors that could help these sorts of situations. And we were talking about the socioeconomic situation. That's what Mr. Ansel Roger seemed to be pointing to. The headline was a bit more inflammatory and sensational, but when you boil it all down, it's more or less what a lot of people are saying, from the education system to NGOs in rehabilitation, to even some police officers themselves, right, and some politicians. And you have an example, and I also have an example, and it's interesting that I think we have more than two that it all kind of comes down to a very similar concept. So I'll let you.
Well, I would say the concept is crime is basically a product of your condition, of the prevailing factors in your life. So my example is actually quite personal. I grew up in Mover, the first like 12 years of my life. So a lot of my maternal family members are from Mover. So I actually reached out to my cousin as a black male, to get his perspective, because he remained in what we would call a hotspot. He would say, he blatantly said the ghetto for most of his adult life until he could have afforded to move. So I asked him, as a young black male growing up in Mova, how was he able to stay away from the life of crime that everybody assumes that all the black males in Mova are subjected to? And the first thing he said to me immediately was having strong involved parents, essentially. He's like, my parents, my mother and father. He's like, firstly, as he was older, he did start to interact more with the boys on the block. And he did see some things and certain things pass by him. But he found that oftentimes they didn't necessarily directly try to involve him. And he said when he asked them, well, why ain't passing the thing to me? Why? They said to him straight up, one, your father. We know who your father is and we know what he stands for, so we're not trying to involve you in that. And then he said when he was younger, his mother and his grandmother and his father, so he had this community around him, did not allow him to line late and stay out and hang out. They always pushed the importance of education, tried to keep him inside, tried to keep him involved in basketball and other activities to keep him away from that. So that's strong, involved parents in a positive way. Then he said it was basically down to your family values. Similar to the involved parents, but it's also the culture, because as I said, he said, you know, certain boys, and unfortunately we compared notes about another cousin of ours who grew up in Mova as well, who was eventually killed and allegedly was involved in criminal activity. And he said the difference between him and our other cousin was that that other cousin basically kind of grew up on the street. So the culture of his parents and grandmother was be inside, be home, don't bring nothing home from nobody, etc., etc. Education. Whereas our other cousin, unfortunately, his parents were kind of busy and left him on the corner, and he was kind of raised by the boys on the block. So it's that difference in the culture and the family values. And lastly, he saw it as a point of poverty. He said, okay, he wasn't rich, but he had a little more. His father was working TSTT, so he made a little more than others, whereas the boys around him really didn't have much. So gang leaders, he said, used to give them $200 a day just to go and stand up and watch and inform when the police was coming. So back then, $200 a day.
That's a lot.
That was a lot because these fellas had nothing.
I mean, for a young person now doing nothing, that's still a lot.
So these boys had nothing, and the gang leader provided them with a form of sustenance, and their parents, in addition to being poor, were ignorant about other opportunities available. Whereas I said, his father worked TSTT, his father had other perspectives, could give him other guidance. These parents, the combination of poverty and ignorance, and left the boys vulnerable.
Ignorance as a word kind of gets a bad rap because the
ignorance
actual
as
word,
in actual lack of knowledge.
It's not to
not
put
a bad
anybody down.
behavior.
Yes.
They lack the actual knowledge of how could they get themselves.
And there are very many cases where it's no fault of yours. You just don't know, you don't know what you don't know. But you made a point before I kind of tell you the parallels and where my example differs. You made a point where the guys on the block, as he was older, did not involve him because they knew that's not what he was about. And I'm actually quite happy to hear that. I find that's very commendable of them that they were willing to recognize, hey, this is not what he's about. Let's not encourage him to do this. Let's not include him. Because it could very well be the reverse. A friend of mine, he had to find, he did not have anything not what your friend had. He had a grandmother, and I think that was more or less it by the time he was a teenager. But he found friends and an environment that basically kind of
groomed him away.
Yes, it gave him something else to do, something else for his life to enjoy. It gave him a wider perspective directly in his case.
Yes.
But I think in his example, it could have very well been easily, not necessarily that I would encourage him to do the wrong thing, but the guys on the block didn't necessarily understand his choices and might have, you know, tried to dissuade him a little bit sometimes about them, hey, why are you going here for, why are you doing this, and blah, blah, blah. And he eventually stayed the course, and, you know, they're still his friends, you know, it's not like it was a whole set of illegal activity going on. He calls it the ghetto too, right?
Yeah,
when he says it straight up, that's
ghetto.
what he says, right? But at the end of the day, in a lot of aspects of his life, he realized he got exposed to more, so his horizons are wider.
And I pointed that out to my cousin. He didn't necessarily indicate that as a strong issue. As I said, for him, he found it was literally having mother, father, grandmother on him all the time. But as I said, his father had a little more, and his father actually took him out of the government primary school in Mova and put him in a private school, not the fanciest one, but and in that primary school, he was exposed to other individuals who were not from the ghetto. So his perspective, my cousin's perspective would have grown. Even as a child, you don't even realize the impact of connecting with different people from different areas. It isn't necessarily that they have to be rich, but being exposed to other values. And he said that sort of shaped his mindset. So even if the fellows wanted to pass something to him, between having his very strict parents and them knowing his parents and the exposure he had from these schools, he said his mindset was just different. He knew there was another way.
And I know of another guy who had the rich family who went to the prestige school in Port of Spain. And he values the diversity of his environment as well. You know, he was the rich one, right? But he was coming from outside of Port of Spain to go to St. Mary's, and he valued all of his friends, rich, poor, black, white, Chinese, Indian, Syrian, whatever the mix was, because prestige schools are more diverse than we think, right?
I also value the exposure I got to the prestige school I attended. I really don't like the phrase prestige school, but
I know, right?
I rather just, you know, 7-year school, whatever. But as I said, I did grow up in Mova for like the first 12 years. We moved to Shogunas, so I feel kind of like a central person. But going to that school, because I wasn't rich, it really showed me things I had never seen, never heard. And I feel that also builds in you a sense of aspiration.
Yes.
Because if you only live here and see this and associate people with this same mindset, it limits your view as to what you could do. Maybe you think the only thing you could do is stand up on the block and look out for the gang member.
The one last thing that I have to say, though, sometimes it almost weirds me out. And I guess, like, if our country was big like America, it might make more sense to me. But little Trinidad, and I'm like, look how different. I just look at the cars, right? It's not even to say the cars. The cars could be very different. I get that, but that's just about money. But like, to me, when I look at who drives the cars, like, I feel that person probably has no idea what that person's life is, and they live in the same country, and this country ain't big at all.
And that's the thing, and that's another issue we keep talking about. There's a widening of the socioeconomic gap. So people can't even understand what another person would be experiencing, and that affects probably the policies they are devising. Because in the Ryan report, it was asked, no, not in the Ryan report, some other article I read about, again, this issue about young black boys, the person asked, has anybody ever actually sat down and asked these boys about their life and why they end up where they are?
Well, we have a caller, but I'll just say, it's not the widening of the gap that worries me, you know. Okay, well, sorry, we now heard that we had a caller and we lost caller, but caller, please call us back. It's not that the fact the gap is widened. That's not actually what worries me. What worries me is the gap could widen, but poor people could still be getting richer and elevated out of poverty. The problem is when the bottom end of the gap is going in the wrong direction.
Right, so the gap is widening because some people are getting, they're worse off economically.
They're worse off, right? Or they're growing, but they're not keeping up with the demands of inflation and so forth and so on. That's what worries me, and that is very, very, very real, and I think in this country.
But I think we have the caller now.
Yes, we do. St. Anne's is back. We got him. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. First-time caller.
Welcome.
I want to talk about something you said earlier. You referred to the individual who died under unnatural circumstances as a criminal who became a victim. I just want to be clear. That gentleman may have been arrested and charged with a crime, but he had not gone before the court.
That is true. That is true.
This is for you, Sean.
Yes.
Normally, I would say that is a slip of the tongue. But because you are in media, it's important to draw that distinction, right? Second thing, there's been this talk about raising the retirement age from 60 to 65 for quite a while. And it's been talked about on the government side, the opposition, trade unions. Everybody, well, not everybody, the government certainly hasn't gone into this forum, but a lot of people have been making this mistake of associating the talk about raising the retirement age with public officers. The conversation is about raising the pension that the National Insurance Board pays to contributors, raising it from 60 to 65. This business of public officers' retirement age going from 60 to 65 is not currently under discussion. That requires a constitutional amendment that involves the support in the opposition in the lower house as well as in the upper house as well. So what we're talking about is a simple majority that the government, when they decide to go ahead, can have from moving the NIB pension from 60 to 65. Now, that will have an impact on public officers because a lot of public officers depend on that pension as an interim measure to survive on once they retire at 60.
Yeah.
So that will become particularly difficult for those who depend on that.
Okay.
They'll have to wait a further 5 years. But that is the conversation, not the retirement age of public officers.
So to be clear, what you're saying is the age at when they start to get payments will go from 60 to 65?
NIB pensions, yes.
Okay.
That's what's under discussion at the moment, not public officers going from 60 to 65. That is an entirely different arrangement, and it requires a constitutional change involving the support, certainly in the lower house, of the opposition.
Right.
And at this point, I don't think the opposition is willing to support that.
Yeah. Thank you, caller, for that, but we do have another caller waiting. But thank you for that. That's interesting. That's an interesting point.
But then that's worse. So now you are retired at 60 and have to wait 5 years?
Are you forced to be retired at 60 now?
Well, that's what the caller is indicating.
So we have another caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Morning, caller. You on the air?
Hey, good morning, Sean.
Morning.
And good morning to your guest.
Good morning.
Sean, in reference to the conversation concerning Mr. Roger's comments in the papers, I found his comments to be rather out of place. I don't think that the way in which he made those comments and the headlines of it was appropriate. There's so much more involved in looking at that particular situation. And when you see that it's also a global issue, this is not just a Trinidad and Tobago issue, this is a global issue.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you that there's something in the mix that is not being considered, is not being looked at, and it's been there for a while. As Malcolm said, the chickens eventually come home to roost, and that is what's happening. The chickens are coming home to roost. But where have the chickens been that they're now coming home to roost? So we're not taking that into consideration. Also, I want to know, where are the stats for the big bosses, the cartels, the ones who are actually bringing in the caches of guns, cocaine by the tons? Is that the young black men also doing that? And studies have been done to show who the big bosses have been, the ones who actually hiring and paying these young boys in the communities to push the drugs, which is fueling the gang wars and things of this nature. They're not the ones bringing in the cocaine that they're fighting over. They're not the ones bringing in these big caches of guns. So where are the stats for that? You see? And we have to start there. If we want to solve this problem, we have to also start. We can't just target the young black boy on the street, because all that's going to do is just fill up the jails. The United States has been successful with that. It just fills up the jails. And what are you doing in the jails? Are you rehabilitating them? No.
Okay.
Right? They're going in and they're coming out, as one of my colleagues say, as animals.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say, though, the headlines, and so Roger is not responsible for the headlines. So I understand where, and I think...
And we discussed that, so I wanted to call up Miss.
Although I think there's something based on what the caller says. Maybe it would have been better if he not used, because we acknowledge that the phrasing
the headline does make you defensive.
charged.
As I said, it did make me defensive. But when you get down into it, because the caller said the question was, where were they all the time? But he said it there. He was given his reason as to why. He wasn't blaming them. He was saying there's a reason why they end up the way they are, because of the hopelessness of their situation.
But the headline is...
But
the headline could have been better.
Well, that's not Ansel Roger's fault. They go with the most provocative thing he said.
I don't know if you're still in line, but actually I agree with you. That was a mistake on my part, because I do think I was thinking about also there's white collar versus street level crime, but there's also the fact that in between that, the criminal bosses are not foot soldiers, and they're not white-collar criminals.
But wait, before we go on, that was something I wanted to mention, though.
Right.
And I did think of that, and it didn't come up.
Yeah, it's our fault, yeah.
The statistics, again, from the Ryan report was back then was that 65%, I hope I'm quoting it right, because I can't find it right now, 65% of our crime, gang-related crime, I think they were specifically saying, was related to the drug trade, right? And that was a narrative that we keep hearing, that a lot of our criminal and murders and whatever are related to the drug trade. But I was thinking about it today, is that so? Because, there was a time where we keep talking about these places are hotspots, you can't go there, murders all the time, lab until move or whatever. But when last you heard of murder in Mover, Laventille? When I look at it now, murders and murders particularly and violent crimes, it's everywhere. And I am no longer reading in the papers that they've linked it to drugs. I'm not seeing that anymore. A lot of times the police just say the person is known or we don't know. We're still looking for a reason behind the murder. That's what I'm seeing more.
Tobago, thank you. I assume, I don't know if, I don't think you're still with us. So while we're waiting for other callers, the thing is, though, the implication is when they say gangsters killing gangsters, well, gang violence usually stems from some sort of criminal activity. It doesn't have to be drugs, but usually drugs are involved, you know, and territory and stuff like that.
But think about it, Sean, in recent times. Think about all the murders you have been reading. Has there been anything about drugs, gangs, or anything about that?
Here's the thing. I have reached the point where I no longer want to hear about gangsters killing gangsters because there are way too many people who are obviously not gangsters.
Who are getting
Even
killed.
if it's caught in the crossfire, the end result is the same. Peter Kin's siblings, you know,
I just
the 10-year-old is not a gangster.
What all of that? I have not heard what spurred on that killing. What was the result?
Well, we don't know, don't want to speculate, but the unfortunate thing in this country is, more often than not, the speculation is, well, somebody linked to the victims or one of the victims themselves was involved in something.
But again,
that actually could be true, and I think that's a bad sign.
I think we have moved away from even that narrative.
Well, that could be true. That could be very well true. We might just want to have that assumption to make us feel better at times.
You don't even hear that anymore. Because before we used to say people were not worried about crime. Well, that's just gangsters killing gangsters. Now everybody's worried.
Yeah, you could be in the line of fire, just wrong place, wrong time. We have Dabity on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yes, just listening to your little conversation here. As a mother, a single mother too, raised 3 children, they're doing pretty well. You know, we can say yes all about the children, but children do not grow up themselves. You have parents who are supposed to grow up children, and a child becomes an adult when he's 18. So if these children are just getting into mess and mess and mess, they don't want to go to school, they don't want the education, the parent is failing. And who the police should go for is the parent, because a child will always be a child. I sent my children to school with $1. They were satisfied. They had box lunch. They were satisfied. Today they are adults in government jobs. And let me tell you something. Having a boy child with a single mother is a lot of problems. But if that parent do not stand up to that child, doesn't matter what race this child is, Negro, Indian, fair skin, black, it doesn't matter if the parent doesn't stand up for that child. I remember once he brought home a box of crayons, and when I looked in his bag, you don't even go in the children's bags again. When I looked in his bag, I saw the crayons didn't belong to him. I walked back into his school the following morning with him, and I told the teacher, this is not my son's own, and I made sure my son watched me. You don't bring home not even a pencil that doesn't belong to you. Today he's an adult. Today he has 6 CXC passes. The parents are not putting school as important. You don't have to go to school with a Nike sneaker. Go with your normal cheap sneaker. You will get an education. School is about getting an education. That's all. Put it in them. You're not going to school to be the next child and to hit the teacher. And what, the teacher had her education already. She went to school already. The parents are at fault. You look at it worldwide. You look at it now. Even in Trinidad, parents are at fault. The Bible says, train up a child. Parents, train them up. If you can't give them $10, let them know, I have given you $5 today. You're not coming home with nobody's $10. Put something in them. School, you're going to school to get an education, to learn to read, write, spell, and you will come out something at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be the president or the prime minister, but you will come out something. Once you get those little CXC passes, now, when my son got his CXC pass, I said, so where are you going from here now? Let me hear where you're going. You have 5 CXC pass. You could become a policeman. You could become a teacher. I put it in him. But you're not going to stay home and lie down on a bed and tell me you want your license. No. No, the parents must put it in. And today where he is, today he has his visa, he can travel, he can go, because you have to put it in them. But what we are seeing in the children today is not the children, it's not the race of the child, but it's the parents that don't care anything again, and they're giving up on their children and allowing them to do anything, and not even putting school as the worth of their lives.
Yes.
And that's all school is, the worth of your life. I'm a grandparent today, and I put it in my granddaughter.
Yeah.
Remember, darling, when you go to school, stay focused. Watch the teacher. You are learning, she's teaching.
Yes,
put obedience in them.
Thank you,
Put
Sorry,
obedience.
Cora,
What we are
I'm going to have to ask you.
parents are feeling. Police, when you hold the child, please go for the parent and put some handcuffs around the parents too. They are failing children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller.
I think the caller basically supported what I said, that my cousin said. It was having strong, involved parents. Some of these parents don't know any better, but...
No, because, I mean, yes, it's some cases where it's children raising children. They had the kids too young. And they might be negligent. That doesn't always come together, right? And it could be the case where you have parents that having children, they can't afford their 4th child, they have an 8th child.
That is...
Right?
You believe my cousin said that? He's the only child to his mother and father.
Exactly.
But the same thing.
Not saying that you have to only have one child. But they have people who can't even afford one child, and you have to say, is it right for you to bring this child into will, and you can't provide for them?
And then you have your siblings watching siblings as the parents try to go out, try to get $1.
Parentification. That's actually a thing in the States now, parentification.
Yes, that's a thing. That's a thing.
But I think what the caller says, to sum it up, there's this, I can't remember where I heard this, but it's basically, you know, when the child succeeds, it is their accomplishment. But when the child fails, it is the parent's failure.
Well, I thought you were going to say the other thing I heard, which is basically when the child is successful, is the father up in front, yay, and when the child is not, is the mother crying in the court or whatever. Most times you see it like that.
Both works as well. So I want to thank our callers for calling in. Good points raised. Caller from Tobago, I hear you though. I hear you though about that headline, right? It just adds fuel to the fire, because not everybody's going to read the article and go down into it. Not everybody, some people, they want to hear this. They want the easy answer.
Well, it's true.
Well, Janelle, I don't know if you have any last words.
No, I have no last words, actually. I leave the last words to you.
Well, as my co-host always says, it's a good day. We can make it if we try. And this issue, what we are speaking about, it all comes back down to one big thing, how the direction our country is going, right? And there are a lot of things that need to be fixed. And at the end of the day, just like our parents need to be involved in their children, citizens need to be involved in their country.
Correct.
I think that's more or less what it boils down to. I know people want to say, what is the solution? This might sound like a cop-out, but it's not going to work if we're not involved and if we don't try to give our input, give our time, and even just to say in proper constructive ways, like how you vote, your opinion on the country's direction, your approval or disapproval of a government, all of these things matter. So
I don't know. I might say I was going to say I'm tired of hearing people's opinions. I want to encourage all of us to action.
Well, right.
Action.
That's the thing.
We don't have to have $1 million. We start in our community. Start at home with your children, but also start in your community. What can you do? Where can you volunteer? How can you affect a child's life in a positive direction? Get involved.
Thank you. I was not phrasing it correctly. It's not about stating an opinion. It's about expressing yourself in getting involved. Folks, on that note, we will close the show. We will see you next week, God willing. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
WESN.
I'm Keaton Shaw, and we are WESN, the content capital.